Good evening. It is now 7:02 and I call to order the regular meeting of the Victoria City Council. This evening, I'd like to take a moment and recognize and thank all of our local veterans. Thank you for your bravery, your courage, and selflessness in service to our nation. We are so very grateful. I also want to take a moment to honor one of our own this evening. On October 23rd, we lost a colleague and a friend. Public Works leader Jeff Borg passed away unexpectedly at home, and he worked for the city for 17 years in the Public Works and served our community as a relief firefighter. His loss is and will be felt by all of us here at the city and throughout our community. Before we begin our Pledge of Allegiance, I invite you to stand with me in a moment of silence while we recognize our veterans and honor our friend and colleague Jeff Borg, and then we'll begin the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on our agenda this evening is announcements. The City Council will hold our Truth in Taxation budget hearing on Monday, December 11th at 6:30 p.m. in the Council Chambers at City Hall. While this is our formal hearing, we encourage all community members to provide comments on our budget prior to the December 11th hearing, as we're hard at work developing and refining that budget now. The City Council will also consider adoption of the 2024 budget and 5-year capital improvement plan on Monday, December 11th at 6:30 p.m. after the Truth in Taxation hearing. All meetings of the City Council are open to the public and held in the Council Chambers at City Hall unless otherwise noted. If you're interested in speaking at a council meeting, we encourage you to contact our city clerk for more information. In other announcements, the city will once again host our annual winter lighting event. Light Up Victoria is scheduled for Thursday, December 7th from 6 to 7 p.m. at Bayfront Plaza, and we hope to see everyone there. Our next order of business is to adopt the final agenda. Oh, pardon me, we have a proclamation this evening, which I will read from the desk. A proclamation to recognize November 25th, 2023 as Small Business Saturday. Whereas it is with great pride that the City of Victoria celebrates the invaluable contributions made by our local small businesses to our community and economy. And whereas we acknowledge that small businesses account for a significant portion of the total economic activity in the United States, generating a staggering $12.9 million net new jobs over the past 25 years. And whereas 93% of consumers prefer to shop small businesses for the distinctive shopping experience, one-of-a-kind products, unique environments, and wonderful customer service. And whereas as a city, we are committed to supporting our local businesses as they create jobs, foster innovation, boost our economy, and provide opportunities for individuals to achieve financial success and independence. And whereas the Saturday after Thanksgiving has been endorsed by advocacy groups, the public, and private organizations across the United States as Small Business Saturday. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Mayor Deborah McMillan of the City of Victoria, do hereby proclaim November 25th, 2023 as Small Business Saturday and urge all residents of our community to support the small businesses and merchants not only on this designated day, but throughout the year. Our next order of business is to adopt the final agenda. Council, can I get a motion to adopt the final agenda?
Motion to adopt the final agenda.
I have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on to our next item, which is open forum. Open forum is the opportunity for anyone to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda and not an application form that will be coming to the council at a future date. Please don't expect action from the council this evening regarding your comments. We may ask clarifying questions, but open forum is not intended to be a back and forth discussion. We have someone registered to speak in advance, Mr. Stephen Olson, representing Victoria Boy Scout Troops 3337 and 53337, that sounds like a zip code, is here this evening. Mr. Olson, please approach the podium. Tell us your name and address for the record, please, and proceed with your comments.
My name is Steve Olson. My address is 2320 Timberwood Drive in Chanhassen. And I am here to ask on behalf of the scout troops that the Lions support to waive the fee to use the pavilion for their meetings. I ended up here because I am the charter organization representative. The troops are essentially our youth program of the Lions, for this specific club anyway. And for the last couple of years, the scouts have submitted their dates to the Park and Rec staff, and they've been blocked off, and there has not been a charge. They went to do that this year, and with the turnover and the staff had looked at what's actually on the books, and to their credit, they said, we can't do this because nothing tells us that we can. So as the charter organization representative and also a former scoutmaster of these troops, I was asked to get involved and see if there's something that we can do. And you may or may not know the scouts have recently changed over the last couple of years. They're now, instead of Boy Scouts of America, it's Scouts BSA, and they have a men's group and a women's group, and that's why you have two different numbers. They operate under the same umbrella. They have the same parent organization. They do all of their planning together. Their meetings are together. And whatever activities they do that are appropriate for co-ed type activities, then they do those together. But the Victoria Lions have been the charter organization since the start of Troop 337. And when the opportunity for adding a girls program, we went to the boys and asked, are you interested in doing this? And they were. So the scouts help with all of our Lions functions, all of the fundraisers that help fund the pavilion, and their meetings are on Mondays. They usually do 2 or 3 a month. So I think it's typically times that are not interfering with other activities going on there. So I'd just like to, on behalf of the Lions and the Scouts, ask if you'd consider waiving the fee for their meetings.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Olson. Ms. Hardy, because we aren't, this isn't on the agenda this evening, how do we move forward with the discussion on this item?
Mayor and members of the council, I think should you find that it would be appropriate to have a brief discussion just to give staff direction, that I would find that helpful. But if you wanted to do a more in-depth review before making a decision, I would recommend that we schedule that for a future date.
All right. I do have a couple questions. Number one, I would say my first question would be, what is that fee? And, how much money are we talking about? And then the second thing is, are we offering that waiving of the fee to any other organizations? Those would be my questions for you. And I don't know if you have that information off the top of your head. Ms. Swanson is coming from the back here, so she must have it. So please, Ms. Swanson.
Mayor, members of council, so looking at a nonprofit resident rate, which would we would suggest for a group like the local Boy Scout troops, it would be $100 fee for the use of that space. And then we do not currently have an ongoing direction from council about waiving fees for any other groups other than the Lions Club, which is part of the contract of hosting the Lions Pavilion. Any nonprofit that would ask to waive the fees, we would seek council direction for that.
So this is the only organization that has this in place currently. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct, yes.
All right, thank you. Council, questions?
Was it $100 per or $100 total?
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. It is $100 per,
So
meeting.
this is a significant amount of money
Yes.
for everybody. Okay.
In that,
Yeah,
just a
Councilmember Reif.
clarification, that rate is a weekday rate, correct? So if it was a weekend rate, it would be different?
It would go up to 150.
Okay.
And the other clarification, just to note, is the $100 fee, and all fees are related to the Lions Pavilion are just based on staff time related to processing those fees, as well as the $88 charge we get for cleaning. Typically, for a little bit more background in researching the past conversations that have been had with the Boy Scout troops, we do not pay for cleaning. Our cleaning company does not come in after the Boy Scout troops for that cleaning service.
This feels like, Ms. Hardy, please.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Just to want to quickly add that rate, the $100 rate, is the lowest rate that your ordinance, your fees are set by ordinance. So the ordinance that for the pavilion, that's the lowest rate possible. I think it goes up to over $300 for a private function on a weekend. So this would be the lowest rate that your fee allows for us to charge.
This feels like it needs a bigger discussion in my mind. Council?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I'm seeing consensus. Let's bring this back for a future discussion, and we'll, in the meantime, bring it back as quickly as possible. And in the meantime, do we continue to waive those fees?
Mayor and members of the council, as you know, your fees are set by ordinance, so the staff does not have the authority to do that unless otherwise directed by the council. So you
How many
be
meetings are,
within your power to or direct us to do that.
how many meetings are with, I mean, is
Councilmember Gunderson.
to the end of the year, they're paying, or is this for next year?
Mr. Olson, do you know, do they have meetings coming up? Please approach the podium again. We can't hear you otherwise on TV. Do they have meetings the rest of this year, or do we know how many?
They did submit a list. They had meetings. I think they've got 2 meetings in November, 2 meetings in December,
Okay.
and then they have 2 or 3 meetings through July on various Mondays.
Okay. Yeah, I think we need to talk about this. I would be in favor of it. Ms. Hardy, how quickly can we bring this back?
Mayor, members of the council, you're going to actually be set to take a public hearing and do your fee ordinance on December 12th. We could certainly incorporate some information for you and maybe potentially some recommendations for you to consider and discuss as part of that that agenda item before you take the public hearing and before you take any action on the ordinance. So December 12th,
Okay, that seems expedient enough.
11th, my apologies.
That seems expedient enough. And I guess I would be in favor of continuing to waive those fees until we get this thing straightened out. And it's looking like
Yes.
it's
I'm
consensus.
supportive
Okay.
for the.
All right, very good.
Thank you very much.
You're off the hook for a bit here anyway.
Yeah, I'm available if you have any questions. The Lions Youth Program, would like to see them just kind of rolled up under the Lions banner, if you will.
Yeah,
So,
sounds good. Thank you so much, Mr. Olson, I appreciate it. All right. Is there anyone else in the, yeah, Ms. Swanson, please.
Mayor, just some clarification around the question you asked of how many meetings they have left this year. They do have 2 meetings in November that would be looking for space, and then 2 meetings in December that they would be looking for space.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there anyone else in the audience that would like to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda and not in application form? All right, seeing no one, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are routine, administrative, and do not require deliberation, or are housekeeping items that are required by law. Consent agenda items are approved with 1 vote unless someone requests an item to be considered separately. Ms. Hardy, does staff wish to pull any consent agenda items for separate discussion and vote this evening?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council. Staff would like to pull items 5.1, the minutes, and item 5.4 in Downtown West.
Okay, very good. 5.1 and 5.4. Council, are there any items you would like to see pulled for separate discussion and vote?
Mayor, I'd like to pull item 5.6.
5.6. Any others? All right, anyone in the audience that would like to see an item pulled for separate discussion and vote? All right, clerk, please let the record reflect that items 5.1, 5.4, and 5.6 have been pulled for further discussion. Council, can I get a motion for this balance of the consent agenda, please?
Motion to approve the balance of the consent agenda.
We have
Second.
we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. On to item 5.1 first, which was moved from the consent agenda. Ms. Hardy, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, members of the council. I have requested that the staff pull this because the October 18th minutes are not actually complete. So we drafted the minutes, which provide a really nice summary of the discussion. However, we did not reflect council direction or any action taken. So my recommendation would be that the minutes be revised to include that direction and action. A lot of that we discussed during our workshop, that there was council consensus to develop guiding principles, and that would be used to create a park system plan, and to bring back to the budget discussion what the levy impact would be if the council were not to fund a parks master plan. So, so that information would be incorporated into the minutes and resubmitted for your approval. So I would recommend that council take action to approve the October 23rd workshop and council minutes and disapprove the October 18th workshop minutes, and direct staff to correct those minutes to reflect council action and direction and bring that back to a future meeting.
Okay, I will make that motion. Discussion, council. Any further discussion on that item?
No, I think what we saw in our summary in our budget workshop had a great synopsis of some of the things we did discuss, so that would be good topics to make sure that those enter into those meeting minutes.
Very good.
I would be a second to your motion.
All right, any further discussion? If not, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. On to item 5.4, which was also removed from the consent agenda. Ms. Hardy, please.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So we pulled this item for transparency purposes and then provide council an opportunity to have further discussion. Our developers are here in the audience, Marco McLean, so Tim and Mark, and then their equity partner, Katie, would be here to answer any questions or engage in some discussion with council as necessary. So this is related to their request to extend our purchase agreement, the dates for the purchase agreement, so the date to close, and then the construction begin date. You've already done final plat approvals, but we've not yet closed on that property. So the project's actually quite complex, and a portion of the project doesn't just have the project purchasing land from the city, but also purchasing land from an adjacent property owner to complete that vision in the way that it would align with the final plat approvals that council granted earlier. So that adjacent parcel is actually key to that vision for a number of reasons. First, it actually provides the framework for the TIF to be in place for this this project, and that those TIFs funds, council would have the opportunity in the future to reinvest that and pay ourselves back for the infrastructure extension. Also, the part of the purchase agreement contemplates that as part of the purchase of our land and how that that project will be situated on the two parcels that the developer would deed us back a portion of the property for right-of-way for the road extension through Downtown West. As you know, it would kind of snake through downtown West and connect on the north side of the parcel and County Road 11, and then the other piece is to get those utilities in there. So that adjacent parcel is key. And then I think I think it's important to communicate that no other terms are being proposed to be changed as part of that. It's purely an extension of the date to close. And then the construction start date. Both of those dates, council had approved for November 1st, 2023, and we'd be proposing a 1-year extension to that. The project is, as far as I know and have heard, our staff have heard, that this project still meets the strategic plan goals in your adopted strategic plan and would serve as a catalyst for development for future phases of downtown West. So on those notes, staff have made the recommendation that council grant the extension. Happy to answer any questions, and then the development team is also here and available to answer questions as well.
Excellent. Council, questions? Comments?
I
Councilmember Gunderson.
I asked Dana to pull this. If we don't grant the extension, would you have to walk away?
Yeah, please.
Tim
Please.
Marco, 17158 Stonebriar Circle Southwest, Prior Lake, Minnesota. Mayor, members of the council, thank you. Member Gunderson, yes, if we don't have land control of the entire site, we can't raise the rest of the equity needed in secured debt to do the project, essentially.
Okay, so if we're in the same spot a year from now, but over that year we've been approached by other developers that have an idea, what's to keep, we lose out on that, and if the justification is a harsh economic environment, what are you doing to work over this next year to get this project through the finish line? I'm not saying I'm against your project. I'm asking a practical question to safeguard the city of Victoria. So what can you do and show us over the next year that we can get to groundbreaking?
Great question, Member Gunderson. Wrote down a couple things, share those with the entire group. So first and foremost, what we've completed to date, different historically than projects we've worked on in the sense that we have a complete final set of construction drawings. Our general contractor partner has completed their entire set of pricing. We've gone through the extensive process, all leading up to raising the equity and securing the debt, which is our normal process, to do our value engineering, go through all of our pricing, say yes, say no, do this later. All of that's complete. Our drawings are either at or waiting to go to building inspector for permit review. We have not submitted them and paid for that at this point. Once we raise the money, or let me start over, once the extension is granted, we don't just sit and hibernate and wait for someone to call us by any stretch. Because our project is very much the definition of shovel ready, we've already kicked off our comprehensive equity raise, right? We've raised about 40% of the money so far. That last 60%'s been a little bit stickier over the last handful or so of months with starts and stops. So we've got a comprehensive countrywide plus search for that last 60%. We have all of our MEP drawings, which is a little bit different than construction. We've got all those complete, ready to go into the Department of Labor at the state level for review. In addition to our investment, we've got a partner in Schaefer Richardson, and Katie can come up and speak a little bit more about their wherewithal, their portfolio, their background. We're continuing to invest our dollars to do whatever we can to push this project along. That includes debt. We've had countless conversations with lenders over the last year. We've got a handful or so that we've been directly keeping in touch with to see where their program is at. So as the investors are secured, we can immediately push that lender. We're continuing those conversations as some lenders say no, some lenders say maybe, some lenders say yes. We're refining what those metrics look like so we can understand exactly when we can put our project into production when we raise that equity. One of the things that we've done proactively is we've priced in all of our winter conditions construction into our budget. so that if we're able to get this thing rolling, when we get this thing rolling, whether it's January, February, we're going to go. We're not going to wait for the snow to melt. We're not going to wait till April or May. We're ready to go. So as soon as we get those documents signed and the cash invested and the property closes, we'll have our building permit. We have our construction pricing already set up so that we can just strip the frost and get rolling. I think the reason that we asked for the 12 months, just for clarification as well, is it lines up with our agreement with the private land seller, right? So those two things tie out to November of next year. Lord willing, there's no one more anxious to get this thing going than we are, based on our investment, based on the vision, based on the partnership that we've all had over the last 2.5 years, I'd say, since we started these conversations. We are not slowing down. We are ramping up. We're doing everything we can from yesterday to tomorrow into 2024, as long as it takes to get this thing done.
Thank you. Councilmember Gunderson, anything else?
Probably, I'm just nervous. I get the ask, and I understand the interest rate issue, and coming up and not wanting to go into debt, or adverse debt that would put your company at any risk of shuttering or whatnot. But for us, trying to get that area kickstarted, I think we've gone through this conversation and trying to get this project going is important, and I don't want us to miss out on an opportunity, whether it's this project or another project, should something happen to this project. And I want to make sure that we have all options available to us to say we've been approached, right, for this particular area. And I don't know I'm looking at Bob now to find out if there's anything that I'm going to say that's going to get us in trouble. But, so I just want to make sure that we're safeguarded on an opportunity to keep this going, to keep the momentum that we had when we first approved the project going into next year. Make sure that we get to a grand opening and things like that. So, Bob, is there something where we would overstep, or if we entertained another opportunity or even listened to it, where would we fall?
Yeah, so Mayor and Council, I understand the request to be to keep the property under contract between you and developer for another year, which would obligate you, I think, if developers prepare to close in a month or 5 months or 12 months, you'd be obligated to sell as long as all the conditions are met, which I think the view is that generally they've been met to point here. And yes, you can't contract with somebody else during that period of time. So the property would be under contract for the next year.
Okay.
Councilmember Gunderson, anything else?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I might add, we had talked about kickstarting as Downtown West Phase 1 was starting. We talked about kickstarting the next part of our process. So Phase 2. Going out for an RFP. So there's, as I heard you say, what is the momentum and the catalyst for further development? There's certainly interest by other parties who are anxious and see the vision, love the vision, want to be part of Phase 2. So something for council to consider would be to go ahead and do the RFP now. The RFP has been drafted, is about 85% drafted, so staff would be in a position to kickstart that process, looking at the Phase 2, which would be north of the Central Green. So that could be an option for us as well, so you continue to build the excitement and the momentum and the vision as this is happening too. So just another thought for you all.
So I guess
Councilmember Roberts, please.
I don't really have any questions. It's more comments. So thinking about this, right? So I completely understand where Councilmember Gunderson's coming from, right? We want to protect ourselves. Obviously the worst case scenario would be we get to a year from now and there's still no project, right? And now we're pushed out even further. I do think though that it probably is in our best interest to do the extension, just because, one, with the economy the way it is, what are the odds that, right, if they can't get funding, right, what are the odds that other businesses, right, other developers are going to be able to get that funding as well? Now, they very well could, right, but it's probably also going to be tough for other developers. Also, you know, even if we found another developer that wanted to do it and could financially do it right now, they're not right? Your shovel's in the ground ready, right? Like, we're going to have to go through this whole, right? Like, development, you know, going through the whole procedure, which, what is that? It would be you know, like, I mean, that's going to put us out farther than November, next November, the way it is, right? So, although the worst case scenario, you know, would be bad, I feel like, you know, they've been honest with us. They've come to the table with us. They've worked with us. Other groups are going to have issues trying to develop that as well. Yeah, it's probably the best interest to extend it, because, you know, if they get their development, like you said, right, in December, January, you can start right then, versus anyone else would be a good year out anyways too.
Any other comments?
Just quick
Councilmember
questions.
Ivansky, please.
The Boyer property, do you have a commitment from them to extend for the time period that coincides to the extension that you're asking for the city?
Mayor, members of the council, Member Ivansky, yes, we do. Yes,
So
we have an agreement.
it's not like they're going to say, well, if the city says we're on board, you've already secured that, so we're the last leg of the stool?
That is correct.
I did think of a question. So we got some emails about this. Is there any downside for this, right? So we were expecting purchase money for the land. We were expecting special assessment, right, stuff. Is that going to affect, or I'm assuming we just had our budget talk, right? So I'm assuming that's not going to affect anything there, but.
Ms. Hardy, please.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Roberts. Yes, excellent question. Your the levy that you just gave direction on, the 11.82 thereabouts, does include does contemplate that we would have to bond for a portion of the Steiger Lake. I'll call it utility infrastructure ready to get those the road improvements complete. That work is already underway to extend the utilities to allow the development to occur. So bringing those utilities to where they can begin their private work. So that's already incorporated into the budget that you just provided direction on. If you kind of visualize where we were talking about our CIP, and in there you had another $4 million kind of in that 26 timeframe, I believe it was, for additional infrastructure on there. So we know roughly to build out the streets and all the utilities, it's going to be about $6 million. And so the goal and the idea is to have growth pay for growth. So as development occurs, as we sell other portions of that parcel, to put that back towards paying ourselves back for those investments. And so as that money comes in, so as they close, as you get the special assessments, that you would reinvest that back into the infrastructure to either buy down your, so you're paying cash for as much as you can and you're bonding less, or you're paying yourselves back over time when that money comes in, if you've wanted that upfront. So,
can you also remind me what the breakdown of the land, right? So we got the Boyer property and we've got the city's own property. How much of it is ours, right? Because the other thing is right, if we decided not to extend this agreement, right? Like, there's no guarantees, even if our land is available. Like, could anything even really happen, right? Like with another, I mean, they'd need the Boyer, and we don't know if they would even be willing to talk about that.
Yeah, Ms. Hardy, please.
thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Roberts, members of the council. Yes, that adjacent parcel, the private property, the Boyer property, is key. As I mentioned, for several reasons. Number one, it creates eligibility for the project to be using the TIF assistance. The idea behind that was to use the TIF money on the back end to pay yourselves back over time. So the other piece is that, to answer your first question, of the 13.5 acres, the project Downtown West Phase 1 will sit on 1.1 acres on the southeast corner of that parcel. And then approximately an acre and a half on 1.17 of Mr. Boyer's property. So half the project is on our land. And with that, you may recall, this was about a year and a half ago, we used the same engineering firm to really look at, they were part of our pool, and they were who you used too, so we could realize some savings as we looked at designing and finalizing the road alignment, where the utilities are going to go. So if the Boyer property is no longer part of that, you're going to have to make an additional investment in redoing some of that work, and or negotiating with a private property owner for utility easements and having to go through to acquire that. You'll likely have to purchase that in some way, shape, or form, as well as the right-of-way access to have the road go in a different location or in the same location, but instead of that being part of the purchase agreement, the risk would be that you would be acquiring that by purchasing it.
Councilmember Evanson.
Just a couple questions, comments, risks. We've had a pretty fair degree of consternation lately with Met Council on the topic of comprehensive plan adjustments, redrawing. Do we feel that this project as proposed gives us a little bit of a sort of safety barrier against that coming in and being a last minute crisis for us that we have to deal with and then potentially tank that? Or do we feel that, like, because we have this project, yes, we may not find that an extension is attractive, but it may be more unpalatable, so to speak, that running up against this new and latest development where we think our exposure is.
Ms. Hardy, Attorney
Mayor
General.
and Council, the city manager is looking at me expectantly.
She's
Yeah,
expecting brilliance out of you.
Brilliance, yeah, well, so set your sights lower quickly. Well, so council member, you're right. And I think you fairly characterized sort of the staff view on there may be a bit of a change in approach at the Met Council on sort of calculating some things under city comp plans. I hear you asking me to give you some confidence that this project may be relevant to that, but I'm just not there yet, and I'm sorry about that. I just, I want to be there with you on your point you're making, but I don't think we know yet. We're going to have to do a little bit more testing with the comp plan, with the Met Council on there, and understanding comp plans and how they are applying city comp plans. So I'm not gonna, I can't, I want to stick my neck out, but I can't do it on this one. So maybe staff is willing to jump in.
Ms. Hardy.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. It is my understanding on news on this front, kind of hot off the press, is that Amira, so United Properties, also in our CBD, but close to Lake Town off of Highway 5, who is faced with the similar challenge, did receive this past week their approval from the full Met Council. So they got a thumbs up on their comp plan amendment. So that's certainly going in the direction that we had hoped, and we feel good about that. But to our city attorney's point, there's
work to be done.
Work to be done.
Okay. So it's fair to say that this potentially still could creep up as a gray area, that we don't really have a bona fide sort of lockout against them coming with this particular project. Is that fair to say?
Mayor and council, yeah. I mean, maybe more broadly to more fairly answer your question, I just, there is a change, there appears to be potentially a change in Met Council approach to development by development calculation against city comp plans. I don't think I know enough, maybe others somewhere in the municipal world do, but I don't know enough yet about what that approach is going to be to really comment intelligently. So I'll have to stop there.
Yeah, I think at this point it's all speculation, right? Councilmember Evansky, anything else?
No, I mean, I just, sometimes there might be a silver lining in this, and that if you have taken some of the recent viewpoints of several large participants in the financial markets, there's a fear that the economy could drive a lowering of interest rates starting in 2024 and continuing into 2025. That being the case, that certainly helps you because the potential, and that's presuming you don't have a forward rate agreement presently executed with a lender right now. If you're still naked on that risk, then you have the potential that if those things do come to fruition, then your project becomes strengthened by having lower financing costs. So I think in that backdrop, given all the other risks that I think we've had I'd be supportive of extending the deadline for this project.
That would certainly be a silver lining. All right, council, any other questions, comments? Mr. McLean, do you have something you'd like to say? You stood up like you were.
I stood up. Thank you, Mayor.
Big information.
Members of council, thank you for the time this evening. I'll keep it real short. Marco McLean Development with Schaefer Richardson, 4296 Gadwell Court, Eagan, Minnesota. The only other thing I would offer that maybe my colleague didn't say is, for us, it's never been a shy of commitment. We've been, together a long time. The approvals and entitlement process was long. We wanted to make sure we get it right with an eye on the master plan, not just our site, and making sure that that was very cohesive and a future to build on there. And then when we actually did start with the architecture and engineering, there was already starting to be cracks in the financial system at that point, and we saw this exponential historical run-up in interest rates, which just brought a lot of uncertainty. And I will say, with Schaefer Richardson's backing, commitment, and ours, we continue. At that point, we were still in some of the early innings of our architectural and engineering drawings and have continued to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we could be at this moment where we weren't saying, hey, may we please have an extension? And, oh, by the way, we still have 6 months worth of work because we went completely pencils down because we weren't committed to the project. So we, through kind of the face of all of that uncertainty, just kept going and have had a number of moments in time when we were, effectively there and thought we would be there by now. And that's, I think, allowing us to stand up with confidence and say what Tim said is that if we get over this last push, which we are most certain we are going to, and that day ends up being 30 below in January, we're putting a shovel in the ground and we're going to move forward because we've made that commitment. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you.
The ribbon cutting ceremony might not be as fun now.
Yeah. I don't know that I'll be out there putting a shovel in the ground at 30 below, but yeah, very good. All right. Well, I can certainly say that this group has been very earnest and sincere in their ability and their push to get this project moved forward, and I would be in favor of granting this extension to them. So I will go ahead and make that motion that we grant the extension to November 1st, 2024.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Very good. Next up, item 5.6. Councilmember Evansky, this is your item that you pulled, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I am pulling this item just in the sake of avoiding any appearance of a conflict of interest. I don't believe I do, but looking through the actual agreement for this, U.S. Bank National Association through their trust company is a party to the note, and I have a conflict of interest declaration that we made as accepting a council member position that if any business in some form comes before city council that involves U.S. Bank, then I'm going to recuse myself. I may not need to. I didn't consult with council, but just to avoid the appearance of impropriety, I'm going to step away and recuse myself and hand this over to the remainder of the council for direction and decision on this one.
Very good. Thank you very much for that. So with that, I will entertain a motion on item 5.6.
A motion to adopt resolution approving the amendment to the loan agreement related to the city's healthcare facilities refunding revenue bond series 2014.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And do we want to note that Councilmember Evansky has recused?
Mayor, if I can just say, Councilmember Evansky is as vigilant in avoiding conflicts as any council member I've ever come across. So we'll make a note of that, I think so.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Attorney votes.
All right, now moving on to our regular agenda. First item on the agenda this evening, item 6.1, which is a public hearing for the vacation of an easement for Marsh Hollow 3rd Edition. City Planner Brian McCann is in the house tonight to present that item for us. Please, Mr. McCann.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Yes, tonight the Marsh Hollow development, specifically the 3rd edition, is requesting some easement vacations for some easements overlaying outlots within Marsh Hollow 3rd edition. So here's just a summary. The preliminary plat was approved in 2021. The 1st edition final plat got approval in 2022. And then at the last meeting, the City Council approved the final plat for the 3rd edition, which replatted the townhomes from 1st edition. As I mentioned, it replatted the 55 townhome lots that you can see overlaid on an aerial over here. The reason for this was because they had slight modifications to the building pads for the townhomes. So this required us to replat those areas to account for minor building adjustments and lot adjustments. And then here I have the Marsh Hollow 1st edition as approved on the screen on the left, and then the Marsh Hollow 3rd edition as approved on the right. You can see very minor differences noted in the outlot shapes that require the easement vacations tonight. These lots cannot be, or these townhomes cannot go over these easements because they don't line up correctly with what was approved for 3rd edition. And then here's the easement exhibit. All the shaded areas are what will be vacated tonight if approved, and then they will be rededicated when the 3rd edition plat is recorded with Carver County. So that includes outlots A, E, F, G, and I. The public hearing for tonight was noticed in the Chanhassen-Villinger on November 2nd and 9th. State statute requires 2 consecutive notices, so we met that requirement. Property owners within 350 feet of the development boundaries were also notified of the request tonight, and it was also noticed on the monitor, in the lobby, and on the city's public notices webpage. Staff's recommendation this evening is to hold a public hearing on the requested easement vacations and to adopt the resolution approving the vacations. So with that, I have a sample motion on the screen for you tonight, and I can stand for any questions.
Very good. First and foremost, this does require a public hearing, so I will now open the public hearing. So if there's anyone in this audience who would like to speak to this item, please step forward. We will ask a second time and a final time. Seeing no one, I will now close the public hearing. Council, questions, comments on this item? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to adopt the resolution approving the easement vacations for Marsh Hollow 3rd edition.
Thank you, Councilmember Gunderson. We have a motion. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 6.2, which is to consider a process improvement ordinance changes. Again, Mr. McCann, the floor is yours.
Thank you again, Mayor and council members. Tonight we have a request from staff for 2 process improvement ordinances. So the intent of these ordinances are to simplify some processes for land use applications in the zoning code and the municipal code. and then also just to correct some minor discrepancies that we've noted that are applicable to planning processes. So first, the subdivision ordinance, only 2 proposed changes in that. The first one being limiting heritage and significant tree credits for required mitigation of wooded parcels. What this essentially does is prevents double counting significant tree and wooded parcel credits for any development. And then the minor subdivision modification would be to limit the number of lots for someone to propose a minor subdivision. I believe the number that we put in there was 3 lots. What this does is prevents anyone from trying to circumvent our major plat requirements for a large development. If they were to do that for the minor subdivision process, it would take them a very long time to do it at 3 lots at a time. And then moving on to the zoning ordinance, one of the modifications is for site plan and building material review. We have that currently as a land use application, but we don't have a current process for it. So that's one proposal as part of the zoning ordinance tonight. Then also clarifying the Planning Commission responsibilities for appeals and variances. Also allowing members of the public to apply for a zoning text amendment. And then removing planned unit developments as a conditional use from certain districts. Planned unit developments are a rezoning, which are their own separate land use application, so it doesn't make sense to have a conditional use upon a rezoning and a rezoning upon a conditional use. Then another request that we had came from our current downtown business owners regarding the shared parking fund. What they are proposing and what we've included in the draft ordinance tonight is to allow for uses other than creating new parking, such as using those funds for parking analyses, maintenance of existing parking, and other uses as approved by staff. And then a section of the proposed language is included on the right side of the screen there. Another modification that we're proposing for the zoning ordinance includes repealing the C1 and C2 districts. We've noticed some discrepancies and their intended uses for our commercial districts. One of them being that our setbacks reference the swimming pool section of zoning code, which is not fitting for a commercial building. Another one of those being multiple dwellings as a permitted use in our commercial district. That's not the intention of our commercial area, so we should reconsider that in the future. And then we also only have 3 bulk standards, one of which is a 30% maximum lot coverage, which is also not typical of a commercial property. And then some proposed changes to the central business district, one of them just being alphabetizing the conditional uses similar to the rest of the code. If you look at all of our other sections, all the uses are alphabetized except for here. And then adjusting the permitted and conditional uses based on the discussion with the Planning Commission on August 15th. One of them was making a specialty retail shop and removing some of those specific uses that we have in code currently, like bookstores and candy stores. Those would all fall under this specialty retail shop. And staff at that meeting with the Planning Commission had proposed multiple dwellings as a permitted use. We did get Planning Commission feedback and they would like to keep that as a conditional use, so that's been reflected in the ordinance for you this evening. And then sidewalk, cafes, and dance studios as permitted uses. And as I mentioned earlier, removing planned unit developments, and then also removing adult uses as conditional uses. Adding tattoo parlors and breweries as conditional uses. And then there was previous discussion with the Planning Commission about adding bars under restaurants and bars, but we decided to keep that portion out and leave that restaurants excluding drive-ins as it currently is. So for the public hearing tonight, it was advertised in the Chanhassen Villager on October 26th, and a copy of the notice was posted on the bulletin board, in the monitor in the lobby, as well as on the city's website. And we did have the one comment received, which was the request from the downtown business owners for the shared parking funds. Planning Commission held the public hearing on the request. We didn't receive any comments from the public at that meeting, and they recommended with a unanimous 7-0 vote to adopt the ordinances with these changes to the draft, which are reflected in the ordinance for you this evening. Clarifying dance studios to ballrooms, fitness studios, and youth dance studios. Keeping multifamily dwellings as conditional. Changing establishments of the drive-in type to drive-in establishments. Combine the laundromat type uses for self-service and pickup, including a 10-day public hearing requirement to notify residents, which we already practiced, but this would just codify it. And then other minor grammatical corrections in various sections. So with that, I have 3 motions on the screen for you tonight, and I can stand for any questions.
Very good, thank you. This is some nice housekeeping work on our ordinances. Council, questions, comments?
I do have a question for
Councilmember
other members of
Evansky.
the council. Where we're amending section 6, which is adding the language about the funds designated for various downtown parking related purposes.
Yep.
Is this just one core downtown, or does this include downtown west? So perhaps maybe staff can answer that.
Mr. McCann, does this speaks to the parking fund, so Mr. McCann, can you answer that question?
Yes, Mayor and council members, this would be applicable to any area within our central business district, so our current downtown and the future west expansion.
All right.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And then just a question for council, are we comfortable with the subject to approval by city staff for the use of these funds, or would we want council to be the ones that actually make the decision on what these funds would be used for once they've been taken into the city?
It's a good question. I had the same question. It feels like that's something that should be approved by council versus city staff. How does the rest of council feel about that?
I mean, doesn't this just, I mean, they're going to take direction from city staff is going to take direction from us. This just allows us to not have to necessarily do it at a council, right? Like when we have one-on-ones type thing, right? Like discussing it and saying, yeah, like I don't know, like, is that something that we think that has to be?
It feels to me like in the previous part of that paragraph, it lays out a set formula for determining how much needs to be paid in, and then it says that if there's going to be a different determination of what that amount would be, then this ordinance grants the council power to, air quotes, change that determination. So we make a determination that we're going to bring these funds into this shared parking. Do we want to further then say that once these funds are in the city, the disbursement of what they're going to be used for, should that power rest with the council and not staff?
Yeah, I think it spells out some of the more likely expenditures of that, but I would say, most of our other policies say, if we're going to divert from the ordinance, that has to come before council. Ms. Hardy, you have a thought?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. So as a Plan B city, and through your policies, the council has delegated to the city manager the authority to make expenditures that are under $20,000. My recommendation would be to be consistent, apply this consistently with that, but making sure that you're comfortable with the uses that have been listed as in here. So to the mayor's point, if there were things that fell outside of this ordinance, in my viewpoint, staff would not have the authority to make that expenditure, regardless if we were making a recommendation, or would think it would be a fall. If it's not explicit in here, we would not move forward without council action, because in my viewpoint, we wouldn't have the authority to do that.
So So that would be your interpretation. So for future councils, would that, or for future staff, does that hold true for future staff under this language as it sits?
Mayor, members of the council, yes, I believe that that would hold true, and I don't see our assistant city manager, finance director in here. I believe that she would probably agree with me, but do you have anything that you want to comment on that? I'm putting you on the spot, my apologies.
Yeah, we were talking about the language in the ordinance, specifically the part that says, subject to approval by city staff. We're wondering if we should have that subject to approval by council. Ms. Hardy has said that unless it's specifically listed in the ordinance, she would defer to council for the expenditure. And we're wondering if future city managers and other staff would agree with that.
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council, I would recommend that it does go before council before those expenditures are made, just because of the type of the fund it is. It should be on a individual expenditure basis.
Okay, thank you. All right. Very good. Are you comfortable with that, Councilmember?
So would that mean that we would modify this language to be subject to approval by city council? Or are we comfortable with that amounts that are in here that are being dispersed out of this fund under $20,000 could be delegated to the city manager to do? And those amounts above, like,
that's
that would
subject
be
to a different
subject
policy.
to council.
Mm-hmm. I guess I would feel better if I clarified that by saying approval by city council. That would be my recommendation, is to change that to city council, just to.
For any expenditure?
No, I think any expenditure outside of what's listed. So the stuff that's listed, we're all good with those expenditures. That's a good parking, those are good things. But if, I'm trying to think of a good example of something that we would want, if it diverts from those listed things, I think council should take a look at it and give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So I would say we should say subject to approval by city council. That would be my recommended change. Do we need to take a vote on that? All right, so I'm going to make a motion that we change the language that says subject to approval by city staff to subject to approval by city council. I have a motion. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, with that, any other questions, comments? Brian, would you put the motions back up for us, please? Thank you. All right. So we're going to take this in 3 separate motions. So I will entertain the first motion, please.
Motion to adopt the subdivision ordinance.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Second motion, please.
Motion to adopt the zoning ordinance.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
That'd be Councilmember Reif. We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And the third.
Motion to adopt the resolution approving summary publication.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. That concludes the items on our regular agenda that are open items. We will now move on to item 6.3, which is a closed session for our city manager's annual performance evaluation. And on that note, pursuant to Minnesota statute 13D.05 subdivision.3A, I'd like to make a motion to close the meeting to evaluate the performance of city manager Dana Hardy. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll now go into closed session. Once we're done, we'll return to reconvene the regular meeting of the city council. So we will head into the All right, I make a motion that we reconvene the regular meeting of the City Council. For the public's benefit, we had a closed session to review the city manager. The review was quite positive, and we have raised her salary to $172,390 for the 2024 budget. I will make a motion to direct staff to bring back a contract to review at the next council meeting. Can I get a second on that?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. There are no more items on our regular agenda this evening, so we'll move on to reports and emerging issues. Ms. Hardy, anything from staff this evening?
None from staff this evening, Mayor and council members.
All right, council, anything from council this evening?
Nothing from me, Mayor.
All right, seeing none, there are no more items to come before the body, so we will take a motion to adjourn this evening.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We stand adjourned.